How to structure an academic paper in the social sciences. So you want to learn how to structure an academic paper in the social sciences? Let me introduce you to the 40 paragraphs. The 40 paragraphs are a way of structuring an article. You probably know that scientific articles are heavily structured to make them quicker to read. There are many conventions and sometimes explicit guidelines. So we now have a strong expectation that every article will follow a similar structure. Now, to put it clear, I didn't invent the 40 paragraphs, it's just that they work very well in a lot of different contexts. And they lead to articles where the different sections are balanced. The basic idea is that you should divide your article into 40 paragraphs of about 200 words each. If you do this, your article will be easy to follow and you'll have the right balance between paragraphs. This approach works very well because it's flexible enough yet provides the necessary structure and balance. So there are roughly 40 paragraphs in a social science paper and your task is to write them. If you write one paragraph a day, it will be done in about 2 months. The rough structure is as follows. We have 3 paragraphs for the introduction, 5 for background, which I often skip or merge with other sections, 5 for theory and hypothesis, 5 for data and methods, 3 times 5 for results, 5 for discussion and 2 more for conclusion. Sometimes I combine discussion and conclusion. So you've noticed that I've already started to qualify the 40 paragraphs. There's a bit of flexibility. For example, if you need an extra paragraph to describe the methods. But in general, the 40 paragraphs give you a good structure to get the balance between the sections right. If you find yourself deviating from the structure a lot, you probably need to rethink your structure, not the 40 paragraphs. The introduction is where you state why we need this paper. This may sound strange, but you need to explain the world in which this paper is needed, the things we don't know yet, the things you will contribute. To do this, you'll refer to broad scientific debates and introduce your central thesis or argument. It's very helpful if you summarize your main findings in the last paragraph of the introduction. Here you'll have a bit more space than in the abstract, for example if you want to qualify your results. The background section is for relevant literature and general background. It's something we tend to get in the humanities and I tend to skip it because I'm in the social sciences. However, the idea remains that either you use a bit more space in the introduction to establish what we already know that is relevant to your paper, or you use this separate section. Either way, I think shorter articles are a good thing because they get to the point, the results, more quickly. In the theory section, we need to establish the theoretical expectation around your central argument. This means referring to a lot of literature, but only enough to establish what we as a scientific community think. There may be conflicting theories, and this is the place to point this out. Based on the theory, we usually end up with an explicit research question or puzzle. Starting with broad theoretical perspective, we end up with a specific aspect that we are looking at in this paper. If you're testing a hypothesis, this is where you spell it out. Now that you have established what exactly you want to find out, we come to the data and methods section. This is where we learn how you did your analysis. Introduce your variables. What is the outcome variable? What is the predictor variable? And introduce your data. This also applies to qualitative work, where instead of your variables, you have the explanandum and explanans and your sources. We need to know these details. Next comes the model or your analytical strategy, how you draw conclusions from your data. Give details so that other researchers can in principle replicate your analysis. What control variables you use and why. How you coded these transcripts, etc. If you run out of space, here you have the appendix. The results section is the main part of your articles. There is usually room for 3 aspects. If you have many more, your paper needs more focus. If you only have 2 aspects, fine. You have 5 paragraphs for each aspect, and that is not too much. I often find it useful to start each aspect with a general result, go through an example, and then discuss exceptions or qualifications. One of the aspects might be robustness and placebo testing. The role of the discussion is to discuss implications of your findings. What does it all mean? This is where you go back to your central thesis, discuss your hypothesis if you had one, discuss the implications for what we know, that is the theory, and depending on your contribution, implications for how we should do science or how policy might need to change. In this section, you'll refer to debates in the literature, so you go back to your introduction and theory section and cite other work as you engage in academic debate. The conclusion really wraps up the article and brings it to a close. You refer back to your central thesis and where we stand in relation to it. There is no need to repeat your methods here. In my opinion, the conclusion is not the place to discuss limitations. Put this in the method sections of the introduction so that we can read the paper with the limitations in mind. Rather than listing limitations, it's better to refer to future research so that we can see how you think we should address these limitations. But those are the implications we have in the discussion. In the conclusion, you can refer back to this discussion, but most importantly, answer the research question with any necessary qualifications. Often I find it convenient to combine the discussion and conclusion in the sense that I don't start a new section for the conclusion, but simply add the 2 paragraphs at the end of the combined discussion and conclusion section. The 40 paragraphs are that flexible.